Is it the 18 to 24-year-olds or the politicians who are to blame?
Politics means nothing to some young people today. This can be seen in the decline in youth political participation. This is a problem and it needs to be addressed.
It's pretty sad when more people vote for the ex-manager than vote for their Prime Minister. I think that's actually what's happening.
I'm not sure that 16-year-olds really are au fait with what's going on, but who knows? We may be surprised.
How and why have young people become less politically active? This is the decline of youth political participation in the UK. The current youth political participation in the UK is quite similar to this road. It's dead. We need it to be more like this, as in young adults in Britain need to be more enthusiastic and actively engaged in politics.
I believe that youth political participation in the UK has been in decline over the past few years, due to the fact that more young people have become less politically active in the formal political process, for example voting in general elections and referendums. Most people I asked also agreed that youth political participation isn't as great as one would hope for it to be.
Is there any? I believe that youths aren't really part of anything political. Well, I don't see it personally, and I'm a youth, so I'm guessing there's no really participation.
Well, I'm not 100% certain, but it seems that on the whole they're not terribly enthusiastic about it. I think that's probably an understatement.
Well, I think there's a certain lack of political participation in the youth today, because there is a lack of awareness of what's going on in the world and how even a single vote can affect the whole political system.
I spoke to the Mayor of Lewisham, who thinks there is youth political participation to some extent. He believes that some young people, especially those in his borough, do engage in politics.
Young people don't get engaged in the numbers in politics that people like me might hope for, but I am also clear that there are a lot of young people who do get involved. We have a scheme here in Lewisham called the Young Mayor Scheme, and we're right in the middle of the elections for that at the moment. So all over Lewisham there are young people who are out engaging in a political process, but it's one that means something to them, and that doesn't necessarily follow that they will get involved in the wider process. We hope they will, but so I think the enthusiasm's there, and it's maybe the way politics works that is turning people off.
So some people hold the view that youth political participation is weak or almost non-existent, but is there any evidence to back these views?
In contrast to the present, youth political participation before the 21st century could be deemed as impressive. This is evident, for example, in the turnouts at general elections, especially in the 90s. The turnout among the 18 to 24-year-old age group was 61% in 1992 and 68% in 1997.
The first two general elections of the 21st century in the UK were held in 2001 and 2005. In both these elections, Tony Blair was elected as UK's Prime Minister. It seems, however, the younger generation could not have cared less, as the turnouts were below average and appalling.
In 2001, the first general election of the 21st century, the turnout among 18 to 24-year-olds was an astonishing 39%. This was a 29% drop from the previous general election in 1997. As if this wasn't bad enough, the voter turnout among young adults in the 2005 general election fell by a further 2% to 37%. The turnout in 2010 did, however, increase to 44%. This may seem like an improvement in the eyes of some, but to the others, the figure is still below the 50% mark, which shows the lack of participation among the large demographic of enfranchised young adults in the UK. It's not only the general election statistics that show the decline of youth political participation, but also local election figures. In 2013, an estimated 32% of 18 to 24-year-olds voted in comparison to the 72% of those aged 65 and over.
This is why people believe that young people in Britain are apathetic and don't care about politics. Even though there was a 7% rise in turnout from 2005 to 2010, I don't think anyone can be too certain in the outcome of the upcoming 2015 general election.
I don't hope that that it's going to be significantly higher than that. You know, if it's 50% or more, then I'll be glad. It might be if Labour or any of the political parties make a big issue of their, you know, one of their manifesto pledges, which is now to lower the voting age to 16. It may be that inspires more 18-year-olds to vote. I don't know. Predicting elections is terribly hard.
I think it will be about the same or maybe even lower, because I don't think that many youths are that interested in voting or in politics, or if they do it, it might be because they've just turned 18 and they feel like, oh, now we can vote, let's go vote. So yeah.
I think it's really hard to predict because you can't see what sort of circumstances the next election is going to arise out of. I think the last election it was quite high at 7%, I think, up from the previous election, purely because if you look at it, we were facing a recession, we were facing sort of people becoming fed up with 13 years of Labour, and I think people were really sort of infused to vote. At the moment, I'd say probably it's not going to be as high, but you can't see what's going to happen in 2015. You don't know what circumstances, but I don't see it's going to increase massively, seeing, as I said before, that a lot of people aren't registered to vote.
Yeah, I think if nothing changes, if there's no sort of, if politicians don't realise that there is this big demographic of enfranchised people who are simply not being reached out to, which doesn't make any sense when you think about it, but if politicians don't realise that, and then don't actually go and try and get them to vote for them, then there won't be any change, and then there will still be, under 50%, which is pretty pathetic. I mean, it's a democracy. Pretty proud of the ability to go and vote. How many countries can do that across the world? I think that to go and to throw out your government every 5 years is actually a privilege, and it's something that I think people need to realise that they have. And once people are aware of that, youth political participation will increase. But it just, and if nothing changes, then you're going to see a decline because it isn't as important this time around, as you said, or it's going to stay the same.
Statistics show that more than 50% of 18 to 24-year-olds don't participate in the formal political process. Is this simply because they don't care, or are they just dissatisfied with the British government? According to the 2007 Hanson Society Audit of Political Engagement, those in the 18 to 24-year-old age group, compared to the older adults, are less likely to be politically active. So the question is, why is it that some of the younger generation are not interested in engaging in politics?
Many young people feel as if, they're left out of the loop, and it's important that we do encourage more young people about getting involved in politics.
Well, I think a lot of policies are not directed at young people.
I think that politicians don't really do much for young people, so young people find it hard to motivate themselves to, go and vote for a politician or campaign for a politician.
I think the majority of youth are frightened to participate in politics, feeling that they're not going to be heard or their views won't count. But I think that is the wrong attitude to have, and it should be encouraged in all areas that youth participate in politics, so that their voice is heard.
Almost everything heard on the media surrounding politics is cynical and negative, so it's not surprising that many young people are turned off by politics. Another factor affecting the decline of youth participation is the lack of political education. Would it help if young people knew the ins and outs of politics?
I think that the perception is that it's all sort of
pale, male, stale.
I wouldn't say that we're not interested in it or that we're apathetic towards it. I think it's the way it's portrayed towards us. It's to do with the whole culture of politics. I mean, a lot of young people, the moment they hear the word politics, they just, it's like hearing something screeching in their ears or something. It's utterly, the way the media portrays politics, I mean, the language that they use teaches politics in a language that we can understand. When you learn teaching us politics in the classroom, don't teach us the entire hierarchical structure, for goodness sake. Teach us the basics of politics, the issues that politics tackles in society. When cabinet ministers, when general elections take place, let the Prime Minister, the candidate Prime Minister, speak to young people, explain to them their manifesto, not pieces of political jargon, to be honest.
Trust issues is also another problem.
I think not only youngsters but adults have all become a bit disillusioned by politicians for one reason or another. I think they promise to do something and then when they're elected, often they don't. But on the other hand, circumstances may change, so that might explain it.
Public outrage was triggered by the expenses scandal and the rise in tuition fees. Most young adults were affected by the latter. The current Deputy Prime Minister Nick Clegg made a pledge in his 2010 election manifesto that his party would oppose the rise in tuition fees. Once the coalition government was formed between the Conservatives and Liberal Democrats, however, there were obviously differences between the two parties, and this resulted to an increase in tuition fees. This policy left Nick Clegg red-faced and many young voters very unsatisfied. Some would say as a result of this, the trust between politicians and young people has been thrown out of the window. Politics also seems to be last on the list of young people's priorities. They are more interested in their opposite sex, their friends, social media, and even trying to get rid of the embarrassing breakout of spots on their faces than they are in politics. A headline in the Telegraph from 2011 stated twice as many 18-year-olds use Facebook than are registered to vote. In just a few words, this headline sums up that young people are not really fascinated by politics and have abandoned the privilege that is their right to vote.
Say if politics really is dying among the 18 to 24-year-olds today, then what lies ahead for the future of the UK government? Will it be in safe hands?
That is such a hot potato question. I wouldn't think that it would be dying. I would think that it is growing in its own ways. But I think again that we as young people need to understand that without politics, without us actively engaging in politics, Britain cannot have a future that is secured by our own minds. We need a future of empowered young people, and the only way we can do this is actively participating in our communities, in politics, because politics is much more than cabinet ministers. It's about campaigning, it's about signing petitions, it's about, if you're unhappy about your youth unemployment figures, if you're unhappy about the quality of your education, if you're very angry about the tuition loans like I am, go out there and make sure that people do not step on us as young people. Go out there and make sure that our future is safe and is in our secure hands, because we are the owners of tomorrow, and our cry would only be that we are engaged in the decisions that take place.
I'm a bit more optimistic about this, because what is clear is that people's tendency to vote and engage changes through their lives. Very simplistically, the older someone is, the more likely they are to actually vote in any given election.
Others thought different. In a recent article from the Telegraph, Tim Ross, the political correspondent, wrote that Guy Lodge, the associate director of the think tank IPPR, said that young people who don't vote today are less likely than previous generations to develop the habit of voting as they get older.
I think it'll be really bad news, because that generation will go through their life not being as interested, and they'll have children, and generally, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, so maybe those children won't be as interested, and it'll just keep going until
politics just becomes very illegitimate and a bit of a laughingstock. But I think that it's up to the person to interest themselves in politics.
So now what is the government doing, or can do, to prevent youth political participation from declining any further than it already has?
Maybe it would help if British politicians actually start listening to the youth of today. Attention, we are now about to play the plea to politicians. British politicians are required to remain in their seats at all times.
Dear politicians, on behalf of all young people in Britain, I ask you to please listen to us. Maybe then we'll all get along. I mean, fancy that, eh? No, seriously, if you do listen to us, then maybe you'll get a whole host of new ideas or a different perspective on proposed government policies. If you sit down for a moment and let us voice our concerns and hear what we really care about, then you can initiate the process of directing policies at us. Then maybe we'll go out and vote. Isn't that what you want? You can't forever listen to the views of older adults. I mean, yes, they have more knowledge and more experience, and you may have the assurance that they will go out in their majority compared to the 18 to 24-year-olds and vote. But we are the future of Britain, so surely we should have a say. Some of us do try to speak out, but we need you to listen to us, and we need you to take a real interest in what we say. It's pretty much as simple as that.
Here are some ideas of how the British government can appeal to young people.
I think all politicians, be they local councillors or local MPs, should be doing far more to engage their local population and being proactive in any youth activities in the area so that they get a good understanding of that area, of that section of the community.
Politicians themselves will go on the shows and they'll go and they'll make fun of themselves, and that is a huge draw for young people to go and actually get interested in these candidates. Obama went on every single talk show the week before the election, and Mitt Romney didn't. And that was a huge reason that you saw a huge number of kids go on. But again, you look at somebody like Chris Christie, who was a relatively unknown quantity. It was unusual. He's a Republican governor of New Jersey, which is a very Democratic state. But he made himself known. He went on all these talk shows. He went on Saturday Night Live after Hurricane Sandy, when he was very involved. His YouTube channel went viral because he had a lot of very funny quotes where he was telling people, "Get the hell off the beach, you're just going to get yourself killed." And there was a huge amount of interest in him because of his appearances on these shows. And I think that it's the same for every politician. Now he's a major presidential candidate in 2016. I think that if British politicians went on these shows, they made themselves funny. And if these funny shows actually talked about politics, you'd have a huge number of young people who are watching these shows and saying, actually, I can get involved with this. It's like, it's pretty sad when more people vote for the X Factor than vote for their Prime Minister. And I think that's actually what's happening, is people do feel like they're more involved when they can, watch it on the TV and then go and be involved in what they see on TV or what they see on the internet. And I think it's the same thing in
I think the first example that comes to mind for me in British politics is you look at someone like Boris Johnson, who, as you said, like Chris Christie, has sort of been on all these news shows, been on these comedy shows, has put himself out there on radio shows, written articles.
And look at the results.
And I think he's got such a youth appeal. I think he sort of crosses all party lines, and people, just young people especially, really want to vote for him because he's sort of trying to make himself more accessible.
Well, the government can work in many different areas. We have the mayor, who works very close with David Cameron, and he operates at City Hall, GLA, and what he has created is a peer outreach team and different youth provisional activities that young people can participate in, and that's a way of basically increasing the numbers of people engaging in politics and actually getting involved in their communities in a sense.
What about lowering the voting age to 16?
One thing I would say is that lowering the vote will give more opportunity and more young people the chance to learn about politics and find out what is going on in their community and the actual factors that are actually they're being affected by. And it's important that we lower the age so that young people actively are involved in politics, and that will encourage them essentially to be a part of social decisions.
Personally, I don't think you should lower the voting age to 16. 18 is when you become like a major in the eyes of the law, but at 16 you have the right to, bear a child and get married, so it's kind of a grey area. And you could argue that if you are able to raise a family, why couldn't you vote?
Due to many contradictory views on lowering the voting age to 16, I decided to arrange a debate between two schools, with the motion being that the voting age should be lowered to 16. James Allen's Girls' School argued against the motion. Their speakers are Maddie Andrews, Scarlett Butler and Tintin Stutter. The Charter School argued in support of the motion. Their speakers are James Abbott, Chris Knutson and Hanny Esser.
If you ask the average 16-year-old how the British Constitution works, or how the idea of MPs work, or whether their council is actually related to Parliament, I doubt many of them will actually be able to give you a coherent answer. Now, there are a select few who are well informed, maybe through personal choice, maybe they read a lot, maybe they even do politics A-level, so they understand a little bit more about how everything works. Yet, on average, most of them wouldn't have any idea what that vote means. And surely, as something that people have had to fight for, half the country had to fight for it at one point, it should mean something whenever it happens, and people should understand that that piece of paper actually makes a difference, and their decision is important, and that they're represented when their MP goes to Parliament. Our opponents may argue that the age is arbitrary. Well, any age we have to pick for anything is arbitrary. Maybe not everyone is ready. However, it is safer to assign a legal age of 18 that comes with the idea of adulthood and emancipation from your parents to the idea of taking responsibility in society. 18-year-olds decide that they can get married. 18-year-olds decide plenty of other things for themselves. 18-year-olds are supposed to be the adults in this country, and likewise, on your 18th birthday, you are given one of the greatest presents of all, and that is the right to vote.
At the age of 16, you can join the army, and therefore we are allowing young people to defend democracy with their lives, which I think is more important. Additionally, I would like to talk about how lowering the voting age will encourage political literacy and active membership amongst younger people.
The opposition claimed that people at 16 can die for democracy, but actually 16-year-olds can't be deployed at the front line. They can join the army and train in the army, but they can't die for the country. Low turnout is really problematic because it reflects and kind of perpetuates a trend towards more unrepresentative government.
Young people are affected by government today, so VAT products, student fees for uni, A-level reform and GCSE reform. However, it's clear that young people don't have a choice in making a direct decision on what happened in Parliament. We are responsible enough to make decisions, so to join army boarding school and effectively give consent to die for democracy, then you should have the right to decide who you're going to die for effectively in government.
You're suggesting that there should be no taxation without representation, but logically this sentence must be true if it's reversed. So if you're not paying taxes, you shouldn't have representation. So are you therefore suggesting that people who don't pay taxes, such as people who don't have jobs, shouldn't have representation?
If we set a precedent for voting at a young age, we start we engage people in future generations. We create a whole generation of newly engaged political students. It is a precedent for future engagement which will completely reverse the decline in British democracy, which can be seen in our falling voter turnouts. So often people say that under 18s are too immature to vote. Immaturity is a gross and shallow justification of ignorance.
This, however, was not the only debate. Some people I interviewed also had conflicting views on the issue.
I'm massively against it because I think it's just a political manoeuvre. I think that both the Lib Dems and Labour are the ones who've strongly been supporting it, are suspecting that people aged 16 to 18 are more likely to vote for them. So they're trying to pass it off as this big liberty movement where everyone will be able to vote if they're young or old or whatever. I think it's simply a political manoeuvre, and I think a lot of people who I've asked who are aged 16 to 18 don't really see the need. They're happy to wait 2 more years when they're actually more involved with the political system, and they may either be in full-time education or in jobs or paying taxes, whereas at the moment not many of their policies actually affect us, so people don't really feel the desire or the need to vote at that age.
I'm going to go ahead and disagree with you entirely on that one. I think that 16, 17-year-olds are hugely affected by education policy, by defense policy, by energy policy, by the fact that the government is going to recklessly borrow money, which then they're going to have to pay off the debt for in 10, 20 years' time. I think that it's unbelievable that you would think these people who are eventually going to have to pay the burden, pay the debt that's being racked up, shouldn't have a say in how much debt's going to be racked up. And to be honest, never mind the debt, they're the ones who are going to have to sit down and do these exams that are being mandated by the government without having any say over what kind of exams they're going to be doing.
I'm not disagreeing that they're going to be affected by it, but I don't see why the cut-off point needs to be 16. I think 18 is when you, by law, become an adult, and by law, most laws will affect adults. I agree that there are a lot of policies which will affect young people, obviously, which is why young people are involved, but I don't think it needs to be moved down to 16 when most people actually aren't seen as an adult by law and therefore shouldn't really be involved in the political system that much unless you want to lower the age to 12, 10, 8.
And I think drawing a line in the sand and saying 18 is just an arbitrary number. 16 is another arbitrary number.
Exactly.
But I think that what you should be doing is encouraging as many people as you possibly can to get involved in politics. And there's nothing more frustrating than being a 16-year-old, being a 17-year-old who is, who's involved in politics, who's involved in debates, who has opinions, and not being able to vote. That's frustrating. And to be honest, if you're 16 and 17 and you don't have opinions and you don't care, nobody's forcing you to the polls. Nobody's forcing you to go and vote. So, I think...
Undeniably, there's already going to be... It's all a question of legitimacy, and obviously, as you said, you want as many people to be voting as possible, but there are undeniably, although you said there are going to be a lot of people aged 16 to 18 who are passionate about politics and voting, there are going to be a lot of people who, at the age of 16 to 18, when they're not affected by all the laws, are going to make naive votes, which they'll regret in future years.
Finally, here are a few messages left for the young people of today.
I think there's nothing new under the sun, and I'd like to draw attention to the Greek philosopher Aristotle, who said, "He who is not interested in politics has no right to live in the city." So we've got to get involved. There's no use us complaining about politicians if we don't really get involved with them.
We need to stop complaining, we need to start doing things, we need to come as one. Our differences should not bar us from achieving, a better society. In fact, our differences should bring us together, because the moment we understand each other as individuals, that is when society becomes a better place. So my message would be, it is high time that we went to the grassroots of, the decisions that affect us and not sit down and just complain. We need to start acting with dignity.
That you should get involved, that it is about your life, it's affecting your school, it's affecting everything around you, it's affecting how safe you feel on the streets, it's affecting, right now it's affecting youth services. We're having to take decisions about closing down bits of youth services for young people, mostly under 18. We don't want to take them, but we've got less money to spend on those things. We want young people who know better than we do what those services should be to get involved and take part in making the least bad decisions, I suppose.
Yes, youth political participation in the UK has been in decline, but all of us young adults can turn that around. Young people need to make their voices be heard, and for that to happen, we need to first reverse the decline of youth activism in politics, whether that's by joining a party or just listening to the news on a daily basis. Secondly, we all need to unite as one and start participating. The politicians, and the rest of our country for that matter, need to know that we are being serious. We need to start participating now for the sake of our future, Britain, and our democracy.